All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to tell you guys a story about Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Conor McGregor, Ali Abdelaziz, the UFC, Dana White, and the audience that makes up the UFC fan base, okay? Now, the point of this story is going to be whether or not Conor is in a position to jump the line and get a title shot at Charles Oliveira before Justin Gaethje, because the UFC certainly, I'm sure, wants to do that. Charles definitely wants to do that. The only people that don't want that to happen are probably some of the fans and Gaethje and Ali, right? And here's the thing about that. If Ali and Gaethje don't want that to happen, it doesn't happen. And the reason for that is because of a thing called collective bargaining. So we're going to talk about that today. That's going to be the story that I tell you. Business, my favorite type of video. Also, there's nothing going on in UFC right now. There's nothing going on in MMA in general. There's nothing to talk about. But I keep hearing people talking about whether or not Conor could get this fight before Justin. And I mean, I don't hear anybody saying the right things, so I will say the right things. I'll tell you guys exactly what would need to happen in order for that to happen. And we'll go from there. Now, this is where I normally tell you guys or ask you guys to subscribe. In this case, I'm going to incentivize you. As soon as I get to 50,000 in a couple weeks, I'm going to do a massive drawing. And I'm going to be giving things away, things that are special. So if you want to be involved in the drawing, please subscribe, and then you will be, and then we will talk about what it's going to be. But I promise it's going to be something good. I would not let you guys down. I promise. Maybe even come to an event with us. Maybe. Anyway, all right. So here's the deal, okay? So Conor says he wants to fight, or Conor says he is fighting Charles Oliveira, right? I'm fighting Charles next, guys. Just deal with it. And you're like, well, how do you justify that? He doesn't have to. He's sold half the pay-per-views of all the pay-per-views the UFC has sold since he came on. I think he's headlined like half of them or something like that. It's crazy. Now, just because he's a huge star, though, you can't just slide him into a title shot. You can't, because there is something that supersedes Conor's desire to get a title shot and the UFC's desire to maximize profits by giving him as many headliner shows as possible, okay? And that is, you have to at all costs protect the sanctity of the impression that the belt means something, okay? Now, we've talked about this a million times on the channel. I'm not going to be repetitive, but I'll just recap for anybody who's never seen any of those videos. The bottom line is this. You can't just throw anyone willy-nilly in for a title shot. You cannot do it. Now, you can, if anybody is watching the movie that is UFC objectively, you can recognize that this is not some bracket playoff system like the NFL, okay? Like, you know, there's not like the 8th seed fights the 1 seed, and then we figure out who the champion is. That's not how this works, okay? If you're not promoting yourself, you are not putting yourself in a position to get a title shot, because that absolutely 100% goes into every decision of who's going to get a title shot. If you don't promote yourself well, the only way you end up in a title shot is you have to win like 10 fights in a row, like Leon Edwards, okay? So like that is a huge part of this. But even if you promote yourself absolutely incredible, you still have to win fights. You know, you still have to win fights. And, you know, so Justin is in line. The UFC said Justin's next. Even though now Charles is saying he wants to fight Conor for obvious reasons. He'll make more money. Okay. And the UFC could do that fight. I mean, the fans would bitch for 5 seconds. Oh my God, this is ridiculous, man. This is ridiculous. The UFC would say, look, Charles refused to fight anyone else. Charles and Conor have something, you know. Charles loves buying Gucci, and he refused to fight anyone else. And people would go, that's crazy. People like me and John McCarthy and everybody, we would do a bunch of videos about how, you know, it was kind of ridiculous. And then the week after that, we would just settle in and start talking about who we thought was going to win the fight, right? And then we would do some videos about how mad Justin Gaethje is, etc. Okay, but the thing is, for that to happen, Ali has to sign off. Well, Justin has to sign off. But the reason why those guys are in that position is because Ali manages who? Who does Ali Abdelaziz manage? Okay, Usman, Triple C, Gaethje, Kayla. I mean, that's not a good example. It's not with UFC. But he literally managed. Like, if you go to Dominance MMA and you go look at the fighters list that he manages, if he just went like this one someday, was like, you know, Dana, we've been doing such good business for so many years. I hate doing this, but you jumped the line on Gaethje, so all my fighters are going to be holding out for 2022. And Dana's like, what? He's like, yeah, we're going to be holding out for 2022. I'm going to cover their bills while we do this, unless you update all of their contracts and you give them a 40% raise. All of them, across the board. Anyone with Dominance MMA, 40% raise, or else we're just not going to fight. They have such tremendous leverage because of the number of superstar fighters that he manages. Like, negotiations are all about leverage, okay? Now, what I've seen externally, it looks like Ali has a great relationship with Dana and the UFC, but that's because both of them they understand the situation. It's better for them, like with a situation like this, it's better for them to be friends. There's no reason for either of them to cause a problem. Dana takes care of Ali's people on special. In case you guys didn't recognize what Gaethje said about his win bonus about the Chandler fight, he said that if he would have lost, it would have cost him $1 million. He was not in a title fight. He has $1 million win bonus. You guys heard that, right? So he's on $1 million, I can only deduce. Do you know any other fighters that aren't champions that have $1 million base with $1 million win bonus? Because I don't. Now, why do you think that is? He's a star, obviously. Gaethje's a huge star. Why do you think he gets a deal like that? Okay? It's because he's part of a collective bargaining group that is with dominance. That's why. Okay? Which is another reason why the UFC cannot jump the line on Justin, just like I talked about. So, how does this fight actually happen, though? Okay? There's only one way that it happens. And that would be if, hypothetically, let's say, Justin prioritized money over getting the next title shot. He knows he's going to get a title shot in this next fight, but let's say he said he was down to wait 6 months to get it, right? So that Conor could fight Oliveira first in exchange for the UFC paying him his show and win money for that event, or at the very least his show money. And then he gets a guaranteed title shot right after that. And if Conor wins, he gets Dustin's deal from the last one. Because if I heard that right, I think Dustin got a $5 million base, right? So, I mean, I'm not Justin Gaethje, but if I'm Justin Gaethje and Ali proposes that to me, he's like, look, do you want me to go to the UFC and offer them that deal? You get paid even though you don't fight, and if Conor wins, you get a $5 million. You'll make $12 million on that fight as the challenger. I don't know what he's gonna say, but maybe he says yes. And let's say he says yes, and then the UFC agrees to that, because in that scenario where they have to pay him all that money, that's 2 Conor fights, 2 Conor headlines. They do this is all math, dude. This is just math, man. Math. That's all this is. So they go through and they're like, oh yeah, so in that scenario, we'll make $30 million additional dollars. The company will make $30 million additional dollars. You think they're not doing it? Of course they're doing it. Okay? Now, again, this all comes down to leverage. That's why Francis can demand having a boxing carve-out. Leverage. That's why John Jones going back up the Brinks trunk, Dana, was the worst strategy ever. The worst strategy ever. We've talked about that a million times. Okay? He has how many fights left on his deal? He's not in a position he vacated the heavyweight, he vacated the light heavyweight belt, and then said, I'm going to hold out unless I get more money. You're like, well, now you're not even holding up a division. If you wanted to hold out, why would you vacate the belt? You know what I mean? Like, that at least was like more leverage, but they still wouldn't have paid you because you went public. You go quietly. Whatever you're going to do, you go to the UFC and you go, hey, look, we ran the metrics, and on these super fights where, a star goes up a weight class, so when Conor went up to 55 and he fought Eddie, these were the numbers. When Izzy went up to 205 and he fought, here are the numbers. When this guy went up, and so you say, look, and I'm John Jones, undefeated. When I go to heavyweight to fight Francis, you can assume that this many more pay-per-views get sold. I want this much money. And you do it quietly so that they don't have to set precedent if they decide to pay you, okay? Because they're not going to pay you if that means that they're going to have to be negotiating against all the other fighters saying, I'm not fighting unless I get blah, 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 which is the situation that you created by going public. Don't negotiate on Twitter. Don't negotiate on Twitter. Don't negotiate on Twitter. Figure out what your leverage point is and then quietly squeeze, okay? Figure out what your leverage point is and fucking squeeze it quietly, okay? Now, sometimes your leverage point is keeping whatever you know quiet, Like sometimes people know things that would be so catastrophic to people if they went public that, at a certain point you could squeeze that bear if you wanted to, or maybe not. But that's your leverage, right? You can squeeze if you want to or not, right? Doesn't mean that you have to, it just is what it is. But doing it publicly, never, okay? Never. Anyway, I got sidetracked. What the fuck was I even talking about? I think I actually just covered everything I needed to talk about. So anyway, if you like, in my opinion, if you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell. Tell your friends. Peace.